All right. So when last we left Sophie and the BFG, they were leaving Dream Country. They had caught one good dream and one bad dream. And now they're heading back to Giant Country. And this chapter is called A Trogglehumper for the Flesh Lump Eater. They's always having 50 winks before they goes scumpering off to hunt human beings in the evening, the BFG said. He stopped for a few moments to let Sophie have a better look. Giants is only sleeping every then and now, he said. Not nearly as much as human beings. Human beings is crazy for sleeping. Is it ever occurring to you that a human being who is 50 is spending about 20 years sleeping fast? I must admit that never occurred to me, Sophie said. You would allow it to occur to you, the BFG said. Imagine it, please, the human being who says he is 50 has been fast asleep for 20 years and not even knowing where he is, not even doing anything, not even thinking. It is a funny thought, Sophie said. Exactly, the BFG said. So what I is trying to explain to you is that a human being who says he is 50 is not 50. He is only 30. Well, what about me? I'm 8, Sophie said. You is not 8 at all, the BFG said. Human being babies and little chittlers is spending half their time sleeping, so you is only 4. I'm 8, Sophie said. You may think you is 8, the BFG said, but you has only spent 4 years of your life with your little eyes open. You was only 4, and please stop higgling me. Titchy little snapper whippers like you should not be higgling around with an old sage and onions who is hundreds years more than you. Well, how much do giants sleep? Sophie asked. He is never wasting much time snozzling, the BFG said. 2 or 3 hours is enough. Well, when do you sleep? Even less, the BFG said. I is only sleeping once in a blue baboon. Sophie, peeping out from her pocket, examined the 9 sleeping giants. They looked even more grotesque now than when they were awake. Sprawled out across the yellow plain, they covered an area about the size of a football field. Most of them were lying on their backs with their enormous wide mouths open. And they were snoring like foghorns. The noise was awful. Suddenly, the BFG gave a jump in the air. By gum frog, he said, I is just having the most wopsy-whiffling idea. What? Sophie said. Wait, he cried. Hold your horse feathers. Keep your shirt on. Just you wait and see what I is going on about. He galloped off fast to his cave, with Sophie hanging on tight to the rim of his pocket. He rolled back the stone. He entered the cave. He was very excited. He was moving quickly. You stay where you is in my pocket, Huggy Bee, he said. We is doing this lovely bit of buck swashing together. He laid aside the dream-catching net, but hung on to the suitcase. He ran across to the other side of the cave and grabbed the long trumpet thing, the one he'd been carrying when Sophie had first seen him in the village. With the suitcase in one hand and the trumpet in the other, he dashed out of the cave. What is he up to now? Sophie wondered. Keep your head up good, the BFG said. Then you will get a fine winkle of what is going on. When the BFG came near the sleeping giants, he slowed his pace. He began moving softly. He crept on his toes toward the ugly brutes. They were still snoring loudly. They looked repulsive, filthy, diabolical. The BFG tiptoed around them. He went past the gizzard gulper, the blood bottler, the meat dripper, the child chewer. Then he stopped. He had reached the flesh lump eater. He pointed at them. Then he pointed at him. Then he looked down at Sophie and gave her a big wink. At that point, Sophie guessed what was going to happen next. He knelt on the ground and very quietly he opened the suitcase. He took out the glass jar containing the terrible, nightmarish Trogglehumper. Ouch, she thought. This could be rather dangerous. She crouched lower in the pocket so that only the top of her head and her eyes were showing. She wanted to be ready to duck out of sight very fast if anything should go wrong. They were about 10 feet away from the flesh lump eater's face. The snoring, snorting noise he was making was disgusting. Every now and then a big bubble of spit formed between his two top lips, and then it would burst with a splash and cover his face in saliva. Taking infinite care, the BFG unscrewed the top of the glass jar and tipped the squiggling, squirming, faintly scarlet trogglehumper into the wide end of the trumpet. He put the other end of the trumpet to his lips. He aimed the instrument directly at the flesh lump eater's face. He took a deep breath, puffed out his cheeks, and blew. Sophie saw a flash of pale red go darting towards the giant's face. For a split second it hovered above, and then it was gone. It seemed to have been sucked up into the giant's nose. But it all happened so quickly, Sophie could not be sure. "We'd better be skittling away quick to where it is safe," the BFG whispered. He trotted off for about 100 yards, then stopped. He crouched low to the earth. "Now," he said, "we is waiting for the gun and flames to begin." They didn't have to wait long. The air was suddenly pierced by the most fearful roar Sophie had ever heard. "Ah!" And she saw the flesh lump eater's body, all 54 feet of it, rise up off the ground and fall back down with a thump. Then it began to wriggle and twist and bounce in the most violent fashion. It was frightening to watch. "Yow!" roared the flesh lump eater. "Ow!" "He's still asleep," the BFG whispered. "The terrible troggle-humping nightmare's about to hit him." "Serves him right," Sophie said. She could no longer feel sympathy. She could feel no sympathy for this great brute who ate children as though they were sugar lumps. "Ooh, excuse me, I'm getting all tongue-tied. "Save us!" screamed the flesh lump eater, thrashing about madly. "He is after me! He is getting me!" The thrashing of limbs and the waving of arms became more violent by the second. It was an awesome thing to watch such a massive creature have such mighty convulsions. "Oh, it's Jack!" bellowed the flesh lump eater. "It's the grunkful, gruntuous Jack! He is after me! He is crackling me! Jack is spike-sticking me! Jack is splash-plunking me! It is the terrible, fright-swiping Jack!" The flesh lump eater was writhing about on the ground like some colossal, tortured snake. "Oh, spare me, Jack!" he yelled. "Don't hurt me!" "What is this Jack person he's on about?" Sophie whispered. "Jack is the only human being the giants is frightened of," the BFG told her. "They is absolutely terrified of Jack. They is all hearing about Jack, the famous giant killer." "Save me!" screamed the flesh lump eater. "Have mercy on this poor giant! Oh no, the beanstalk! He is coming at us with his terrible spike-sticking beanstalk! Take it away! I is begging you, Jack, I is praying you not to touch us with your terrible spike-sticking beanstalk!" "Us giants," the BFG whispered, "is not knowing very much about this human being called Jack. We is only knowing he is a famous giant killer, and he is owning something called a beanstalk. We is knowing that a beanstalk must be a fearsome thing Jack is using to kill giants." Sophie couldn't stop smiling. "What is you griggling at?" the BFG asked her, slightly nettled. "I'll tell you later," Sophie said. So she knows that Jack's not real. He's just from a story called Jack and the Beanstalk. And now that story has turned into like a scary story for giants. The awful nightmare had now gripped the great brute to such an extent that he was tying his whole body into knots. "Don't do it, Jack," he screeched. "I was not going to eat you, Jack. I is never eating human beings. I swear I has never gobbled a single human being in my wholesome life." "Liar," said the BFG. Just then, one of the flesh lump eater's flailing fist caught the still fast asleep, meat-dripping giant smack in the mouth. At the same time, one of the furiously thrashing legs kicked the snoring gizzard gulper giant right in the guts. Ooh! Both the injured giants woke up and leapt to their feet. "He is swiping me right in the mouth," yelled the meat dripper. "He is bung-swaggling me smack in the guts," shouted the gizzard gulper. The two of them rushed at the flesh lump eater and began pounding at him with their fists and feet. The wretched flesh lump eater woke up with a bang. He awoke straight from one nightmare into another. He roared into battle, and in the bellowing, thumping rough and tumble that followed, one sleeping giant after another either got stepped on or kicked. Soon all 9 of them were on their feet, having the most mighty free-for-all. They punched and kicked and scratched and bit and butted each other as hard as they could. Blood flowed, noses went crunch, teeth fell out like hailstones. The giants roared and screamed and cursed, and for many minutes the noise of the battle rolled across the yellow plain. The BFG smiled a wide smile of absolute pleasure. "I is loving it when they is having a good tough and rumble," the BFG said. "They'll kill each other," Sophie said. "Never," the BFG answered. "Those beasts is always bishing and walloping at one another. Soon they will be getting dusky, and they will be galloping off to fill their tummies." "They are foul and coarse and filthy," Sophie said. "I hate them." As the BFG headed back to the cave, he said quietly, "We is certainly putting that nightmare to good use, though, wasn't we?" "Excellent use," Sophie said. "Well done, you." All right, that's the end of that chapter. We'll see you next time.